why they're advocating the protein, they quote so many studies, and they said we were getting people who had this disease, that the other disease. So we did research, and we came up with a higher protein diet, and they pointed out that all of their customers, patients, would say to them, "Oh, you're advocating a high-protein diet. Won't that harm my kidneys?" And their response was, "No, we're not advocating high protein. We're advocating adequate protein." Okay? Protein at every meal.
Right.
Rather than grain.
Right.
And it's the same thing with the other one, Arthur Devaney, who wrote another book. His wife was diabetic, and she developed a very severe case of diabetes, and the doctors were advocating eat complex carbohydrates, and her blood sugar was out of control. She had to be hospitalized repeatedly, even though she was sticking to the diet. But, and he said, he's a PhD, but he's a PhD in economics. So he said, as an economics, that struck me as just not viable. So he did all the research, and he put her on a meat and eggs diet rather than all the complex carbohydrates, and she improved. No more hospitalizations. But I was watching. There's a program on DirecTV called Your Diabetes Life. I was watching that a couple of weeks ago, and there's a doctor saying, yes, it's all right to eat pasta as long as it's whole grain. You don't have to restrict yourself. So
There's a lot of different theories of thought but I just know from experience and just from all the information, it's wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong.
Yes.
Our conversation this morning, Barbara and I, when we were working out together, was I feel good with a very green-based diet and my proteins and my fats. For example, having the eggs and the Canadian bacon along with a little bit of cheese and my spinach, which is very low glycemic.
Right.
It's not a grain. It's a green. And my energy level's tremendous. And you would think, gee, with such a low amount of carbohydrate in your diet, how could you have good energy? I think most of us feel overly fatigued when we eat too much carbohydrate. I think we get tired, quite frankly.
Well, after a big dinner,
to feel that.
take a nap.
With carbs.
Right. But that speaks to the opioid substances that are in them. They give us that feeling of,
euphoria.
Yes.
And then it drops very quickly, and then we want to search for that feeling again. So we have to eat more, and then we have to eat more and more, and the gap closes. And it's just like that search, just like drugs, alcohol.
Yes.
And you're always finding more, and you're never satiated. So it's just.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's wild.
Barbara, the health question aside, do you feel perhaps that the reason that we potentially have had more discovery and investigation had to do with the fact that we did become more of an agrarian society, therefore we had more time to think and ponder and invent? Can you talk on that a little bit? Because that's going to be something that's going to come up with the question.
Speaking as an artist or an art teacher, I have to acknowledge that the Neolithic Revolution, the agricultural revolution, brought in wonderful things. I mean, for the first time, instead of living in caves or huts, human beings began to build permanent stone structures, okay? For the first time, they began to build temples like Stonehenge. In order to store the grain and carry it and water it and so forth, they began to weave baskets and then cover the baskets with clay, and so ceramics and pottery came in, Gradually they began to domesticate the animals, so weaving and dyeing of fabric came in. So there was a lot of good things that came out of it, and also the ability of human beings to live together in harmony in a very large area. Whereas bands of hunter-gatherers were never more than 50. And if they encountered another band of hunter-gatherers, they were careful to move out of the way, you know, because they couldn't both hunt in the same territory. As a matter of fact, Jean Owl's books, I don't know if you're familiar with Jean Owl.
Oh yeah, that
Yeah,
was
the Clan of the
Clan of the
Cave
Cave
Bear,
Bear,
the Valley of Horses, the Plains of Passage, the Mammoth Hunters, and the Land of the Painted Caves. Each one of her books is like this, but you can't stop reading because it's so interesting. And she has done so much research. She's traveled all around the world to all of these archaeological sites. She has talked with flint knappers who have, made the stone tools and so forth with just stone implements. And so all of her books show the life of the hunter-gatherer. They were the Cro-Magnons. And in the first couple of books, they were coexisting with the Neanderthals and the clash between the two of them, okay, which is very interesting. The Cro-Magnons, her hero, based on her skeleton that she saw, is 6 feet 5 inches tall. Her heroine is 6 feet tall, okay, which apparently, you know, as the books developed, was normal for the Cro-Magnons, whereas the Neanderthals are shorter, okay? And the reason being that they were developing during the Ice Age, they didn't get as much vitamin D as the Cro-Magnon people, and their muscles had to be so thick that they couldn't have a long skeletal bone in order for them to kill a mammoth. I mean, picture this. You've got stone spears, you've got weapons, and you are attacking an animal with tusks that are 25 feet long, curled, okay? And the animal itself is like 22 feet tall. You know, I mean, and the fact that they slaughtered so many of them is incredible. And they were strong enough to do it. And that's because they were eating it.
Yeah.
They say that Native Americans were such skilled hunters of horses and buffalo and so forth that they almost hunted these animals to extinction, so they would always hold themselves back from killing all of them. But of course, when the Europeans came in, that ended, so almost goodbye, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Wow. So where do we go from here? If you were talking to a group of people and saying, okay, folks, we're going to change this direction. We're going to start to evolve again.
Yes.
Can you give us some closure to your talk on as to what your thoughts and suggestions would be?
Eat eggs. Eat meat. Eat fowl. Eat fish. You know, make that the mainstay of every meal: breakfast, lunch, dinner. Protein, protein, protein.
Make the ratios different, right? Like maybe make it 60%, like the RDA meat, fat.
Yes.
And then vegetables, and the grain could be at the top, so a little bit, you know.
Exactly.
So you would do like 60% meat and fat, and then do, a little bit of, dairy, and then a little bit of,
a lot of veggies, a lot of fruits. But they
fruits you
say,
have to be careful with too.
Yeah, they say beware.
Lots of sugar in that.
Because the fruits that the Paleolithic people ate
were just berries.
Were very, very small. They were seasonal, and they were not hybrided
like
to
the bananas we have today, and the big fat apples
Big
and
sugar.
pineapples. They're filled with sugar.
Yes.
Filled.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're good for other reasons, even though you're saying sugar.
There's
potassium, sure.
There's
pineapples
lots
have
of
bromoids in it.
Right.
So if you have congestion or any kind of phlegm,
in a very
Mhm.
small amount with the protein. You never want to eat a fruit alone.
right?
It's all sugar. Sugar spikes insulin, and insulin causes inflammation.
Right.
So you have to combine the fruit
No, I'm
with
not
something.
saying don't eat, don't combine it. I'm just
Just be
saying.
careful with people
it's
just
good
think
for-
they
to
can
have.
eat just fruit all day long, make these
Right.
giant smoothies, and then they don't realize they're getting like almost 40 grams of sugar in a clip.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
way too much.
Way too much.
No, I just read too about juice where they said I read a very interesting article to really avoid juice because when you
Right.
take the juice from the fruit, you're stripping away the roughage and the fiber
Yeah.
from the way the fruit was intended
Right.
to be eaten.
That's right.
And it's just like taking a pure shot of sugar.
That's right.
Yes.
It's very
Right,
interesting.
exactly.
You might as well be drinking pure honey or
Yeah.
pure
They
maple
said don't
syrup.
drink juice,
Right,
throw the
right.
juice away.
Yeah.
If you're going to eat fruit, have a small piece.
There's
of it.
nothing wrong.
Right.
It's just people have to learn now to change the ratios around. They should be eating more protein, fats, and then just
Yes.
throwing a little bit of sugar in, or a complex carbohydrate in at the end of their meal.
And I'm glad you said that because in all of the books that I was reading, they say don't avoid fat.
No.
Don't avoid saturated fat. And they say our prehistoric Paleolithic ancestors, whenever they killed an animal, the first thing they did was eat the brain because that's loaded with fat. And then they cracked open the bones to get at the marrow, which is also loaded with fat. They would take the part that we think of, as like, a steak, maybe, and throw that to their dogs because they wanted the fatty bits.
Yeah.